All right. Welcome back, everyone, to the Still Talking Podcast. My name is Joe Still. Today, I have a very good friend, guest on Antarah, Leet. Welcome.
Thank you, Joe. Very excited to be here. I think we're going to have a great show today.
Yeah, and the show today, Antarah is with me. We are talking all about, are you being lied to? I know there's a lot of misconceptions of what's going on in the world today. 2023 is a very weird year to navigate around. It's certainly been weird on its own. I want Antarah's takes on this. We have a couple little subjects we're going to go into, and we'll close the thing out. So, Antarah, first thing up on the desk is inflation. You want to go into that? I mean, where do we start in the world of inflation? What are we being lied to? I know we have a couple facts that we'd like to present. Let's hear your word on it.
Well, I think it's something that everybody in the country, probably in the world, can actually say, yes, we are feeling inflation, period. And I think the big question there is how much. We've been getting some reports from government bodies that have said inflation is a certain number. I believe those numbers are like well below 10%. And to a lot of people, I just don't think that makes sense. I mean, I personally it feels like I've felt more than a 10% increase just in my daily life. I mean, if you look at real estate, there are some statistics that really show inflation is quite crazy. I think 2020, the income you needed for a median home was $49,000. Fast forward to 2023, you need to make over $107,000 to afford a median home, and that's according to the National Association of Realtors. That's
cold hard facts.
It's
Cold
real.
hard facts. I know there was another video actually I just did for those TikTok people tuning in to afford comfortably, and this is the word comfortably, afford a $300,000 house in 2023. This kind of averages everywhere around. You need to be making about $80,000 a year.
Wow.
About 80, yeah,
Wow.
to comfortably afford. Now that's not including different programs you can get in, but that right there's a pretty big number.
That's a huge number.
How many people pulling in 80K a year? It's a small pool of people. I know maybe you can combine the incomes, get it that way, but I mean average what an American's making is less than $50,000 a year.
Yeah, and when you think that the numbers we've just gave are what you need to get the average home or to be
Yeah.
able to comfortably afford one,
Yeah.
it gives a bit of a different picture than we're being told.
Yeah, and I mean the feds have recently come back and said, we're not going to raise any rates. Jay Powell hops on. He says inflation is somewhat under control. We are fighting back. We are getting there. Well, in reality, we've been playing the same game for 10 plus years, especially in this country. Yeah. I know inflation is not the biggest issue we're facing, but it is certainly a big one that I think presenting the right facts to people will help them understand that. Yeah, we kind of are in recession. Negative GDP growth does go into that. They can't just say we have, high, we have no unemployments. Well, the reality is that's not what defines a recession. That's not what defines a bad economy. I wouldn't even say we're in that. We're on the fact of, topic of inflation on its own. Yeah, we're inflated. We print money all the time.
Yeah.
President Nixon back in the 1970s actually removed something called the gold backing, which allows the U.S. dollar to be backed by a physical, tangible piece, that being gold. And since that's been removed, the government has printed so much money. And
Crazy amounts.
It's unstaggering. And the fact that, we send money out for different things and it's not necessarily the best use case for whatever, kind of the whole economy and people have on it. But that's a whole nother subject you can get into without getting political. But I mean, down to it, inflation leads right into taxes. Taxes is next. Antarah, with this new, brackets, I know they're adding about 5.4% actually next year on each bracket, which will give everyone tax incentives. But it goes to show you that people are still paying out of their ass for taxes.
Well, I love the topic of taxes because taxes are an entirely different beast from what I thought them to be when I was a kid. We were told, like, hey, be a good American, pay your taxes, which is still true. Pay your taxes, everybody. But the older you get and the more money you make, frankly, you realize that the tax code is really kind of geared towards higher income individuals. You really have a lot more products you can take advantage of the more money you make. And again, it's not saying we're maybe being lied to, but there are a lot of these lessons that aren't taught in school. People don't know that. I was blown away when I knew I could write things off and I could just have all this control over how much I claim and what I deduct. People don't talk about that. People should start talking about that.
And I know a lot of people will go into it and say, well, big political figures and bajillionaires, they're not paying their taxes. Well, they're not paying their taxes because they're a little bit more intelligent on the tax code itself. Now, just like Antarah said, obviously pay your taxes, but there are ways you can get around to not paying taxes.
Or maybe let's just say not paying as much, or being not required to pay taxes.
Unfortunately, we live in a world where we have to pay a little bit to Uncle Sam. I mean, I think as we should. That helps, your firefighters get paid. It helps your teachers get paid. It helps everyone just get paid. It helps the economy keep going. So taxes are a necessary thing. And what I mean by, people not paying any taxes, what I mean not paying taxes that year, they pay taxes in other forms. You can go into, different, IRA accounts you can throw your money into. There's been talks of, throwing in a Cayman Islands corporation and feeding money through there. It's the way it goes that makes it legal, makes it the best way you can get away from not paying taxes that year. And you could do the write-offs and everything down to it. But, I mean, taxes is a hard subject on its own. So,
And you just think, obviously, the saying, it takes money to make money. The tax advisors that someone with money and good capital has at their disposal will be able to do much more for that individual than Jimmy at H&R Block. Nothing against H&R Block or Jimmy. Great guy. But I think to talk about inflation a little bit, backtrack again. So much of this is like, is this the case? Is it not? What's the number? And I think at the end of the day, perception is reality. 78% of Americans feel that the economy is not doing well right now. If they feel it, they're going to act upon it, and it almost manifests itself that way.
Yeah. And it's good that you say perception is reality, because that could mean that goes right into affordability into this economy. A lot of people think you can't afford to get in places. And although that may seem true, like presenting the straight up facts, I mean, gas has surged in just a couple years, almost double.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I mean, what other facts do we have here regarding, affordability? I mean, there's a lot of Americans just, hopping into the workforce at an older age. That tells you something. That means they can't live in retirement. They have to get back to work. I can't tell you how many people I actually personally know who were retired maybe 10 years ago and now have to step back into a part-time job to make a means of living.
Yeah.
The economy is rough. It is hard to afford some things, but looking, perception is reality. I mean, there's going to be a place out there for you. There's going to be a place out there for you to live eventually.
Of course.
And what's your take on that, Antarah?
Well, just to mention the seriousness of that statistic you just gave us, it wasn't just that a lot of older people are joining the workforce or going back into it. According to the Financial Times, a noticeable increase in older people are applying for entry-level jobs. So that, again, perception is reality. You start to see these things, you start to perceive that's the reality you live in, and it starts to become the reality you live in. I know that's a bit of a circle there, but that's kind of my point. And we're just seeing a little bit more of that, whether it's a grocery trip. There was a report that said Whole Foods, some lady filled up her cart, it was $67. She did the same thing. That was 2019, did it again 2023. It's like 120, almost a 50% increase. So yeah, it is something that we have to be aware of. But I think the big point here is we shouldn't be negative about it. There are actually a lot of good things. I know we were talking about cash purchases. And we can jump into that in a little bit if you want,
and that kind of bleeds us into our next little segment here. The economic shift, where this economy is moving, how the affordability of housing is going. I mean, we could just jump right into the housing thing. I mean, let's be honest. A house 20 years ago for $90,000 is now worth over $300,000.
Easily, sometimes more. That's the thing.
Which is crazy, absolutely crazy. And it just goes to show you on where the shifts are happening. Everything's becoming more expensive, but in what position in that line of expensive things are you going to be out on top? Owning real estate in this market right now is great. You can cash out for great money. I mean, especially if you bought, a while back, you have amazing equity built in.
Absolutely.
A lot of the misconceptions with this come from is, we won't get a good price. I'm like, there's what was the statistic? 34% of Americans are buying with full cash, which that's over a quarter, almost a third of the entire country that is buying with cash. That tells you that there's people out there with some money, and there's people out there still buying houses. If you want to dive into what the actual cash means itself, Antarah, I mean, someone that is not going to just bring a a briefcase full of cash to you and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
this is what I want." There's more emotion to that.
Well, it's very interesting. So, just to give a bit of a background for those of you that don't know the real estate market, we're seeing an interesting time now where there isn't very much for sale. People don't want to sell their homes, even though they would be making record profits on it. And a lot of this is fueled by the fear of, oh, well, if I sell it, where do I go? And I think people are kind of not realizing that they're still going to have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of profit. Go rent for 6 months. If one of every three of the buyers out there is offering to pay for the full thing in cash, you also have a very interesting dynamic. Usually you'll only see that if the market's in the gutter and everything's dirt cheap. So people are snatching these up and they're going to fix them. That's more the 2008 strategy. But that is far from what we're seeing now. So
Yeah, no, I
it's
had a
weird.
deal. I just had a listing the other day go up in a town close to Wareham, and someone was looking at it for themselves, buys it all cash. I mean, it's happening. The house needed work too, but it wasn't for that. The cash was more of a, this is going to be my home. There are people out there that have the money for it, and they're in that position to take advantage on the system right now. There's someone would rather accept a cash offer on their home than they would mortgage.
Yeah, and this just goes back to, hey, you're not being told the entire truth. People are fear mongering the real estate market, saying, "Oh, it's crazy, it's challenging." It's competitive, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. It doesn't mean it's this insurmountable thing that we're making it out to be. Like, a third of people are paying in cash. You're going to make more money for your home than you historically ever could have. And yes, that does translate into what you're going to buy might be more, but you don't have to buy. Based on a lot of what we're saying here, we're probably going to see some changes to the economy in the next few years.
Yep.
Rent for a couple of years. Go live in Bali. We were talking about that.
Yeah, and another thing I'll add on to that, just that fact of 34% of Americans buying in cash. There's another statistic out there that says, obviously the Jay Powell and the Feds aren't going to raise rates, so they say right now. They say for every point deduction, they're adding about 3 million new buyers. Think about that 34%, and then think about what that embodies in an actual set of people. Think about when rates start going down again.
Yeah.
Think about that. That could happen next year. That could 100% happen. Rates could go down. You could miss out on the time. You could have bought a home. You could have missed out on the time. You could have sold your home. We go back to supply and demand. If you have demand, demand will always chase supply. If you always have supply, supply will always chase demand. These things, it's check and balances on this whole thing.
Exactly. I mean, instead of being one of the people that sells their home now and maybe has to go rent for a little bit, but is sitting on a huge amount of cash, you're going to wait until everyone decides to sell. Then you're not going to get top dollar anymore because you no longer have an incredibly exclusive commodity, which is what you do right now in the real estate marketplace. If you're selling, there are probably 10 people out there right now that would buy your home. It's crazy. We haven't seen this before. If there are 5 more homes on your block for sale, maybe you only have one person. Maybe there's nobody that would have bought your home at the price it's at now. So take advantage of the market, please. Make your money, sit on it, be frugal for the next few years. You're not going to have an opportunity like this.
Yeah, and this kind of dives into this other little section we have written down is commercial real estate. We talked residential. Now, what's the field towards commercial? The big misconceptions I hear a lot is, commercial real estate is fine. Commercial real estate is good. It's whatever. You got other people who actually know the industry a little bit and saying, well, rates are high. Really good statistic, delinquency in commercial real estate loans are at a record level right now. It's not 2008 when, they were just lending on, single family homes. This is a new problem that we're navigating in this economy. Antarah, if you want to dive into commercial real estate on how that's affecting the economy, what's going on with commercial real estate? A lot of misconceptions there.
A lot of misconceptions and a lot of just confusion, honestly. And I should put a disclaimer out there. I'm not a commercial real estate agent. I specialize in residential. But to Joe's point, in the last 10 years, we're seeing the most delinquencies in commercial real estate possible. And I think this speaks less to the value of commercial real estate and more to the mindset of people out there. People are a little scared to put their money in things. The rates are going to be higher. The prices are almost always higher for commercial, at least per square foot. And you're just a little bit less willing to throw that money out there. But here's what's great about commercial real estate. It's not about the emotions. It's all about the numbers. Residential is about, does this color of the wall make me feel like I'm home? Commercial is like, hey, is this thing going to make me money or not? If that is a yes, it doesn't really matter what the rate is. There's still money to be made. So yes, there are some maybe concerning things with commercial real estate. We're seeing a huge delinquency in commercial real estate loans. Vacancy rates in office buildings are also, I believe, higher than they were in 2008.
Yeah, and another fact I just want to pop in there is it could not just be the negative view on commercial real estate. You have to think about what the things that are added on to that. It could just be post COVID, people didn't want to get back to work,
Mm,
and they're not going into the big office spaces anymore. They're not going into their job. Maybe they're not even in the same job they were.
yeah,
So you can see that kind of effect. COVID kind of screwed us all up in a sense of getting back to what we need to be at.
definitely.
And I think commercial real estate is just feeling the effect after COVID, and we will get back to what commercial real estate used to be.
Yeah. I think especially with office space, like if I'm an employer, I have to keep the office stocked. I have to keep the lights on. I have to make sure it gets cleaned up. I have to get snacks and desks and water. Or I could just pay someone the same amount and they work from home and I now don't have to spend anywhere near that amount of money. There is logic there. So maybe it's not going to disappear. I think it'll evolve. We'll see different uses for commercial office space, but I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. And again, there's a lot of this fear mongering, and we just want to bring it back to perception is reality. If people think everything's in the dumps, it's going to kind of end up that way because they're going to stop spending money.
Yeah, and perception is reality. Commercial real estate has a lot more use cases than residential. So how can you say home prices could go up in a couple of next months and not say commercial real estate will go up, if not the same, maybe a little less. So I know we touched on commercial real estate a little bit. I mean, moving into world economics and closing this thing out. I mean, we're presenting the facts. We don't want to get political in this whatsoever, but I did want to put this staggering number out. The U.S. national debt continues to grow. That's national GDP up to $28 trillion. That tells you we are the highest in debt, but there are the countries out there that are climbing the ladder to that number as well. I mean, Antarah, without getting political on this, obviously, what are your thoughts towards this? I know there's a lot of misconceptions on the U.S. is not currently most ranked in the world. I would disagree with that. I'd say, I mean, we although we are experiencing a little bit of a rough economy right now, we are still on the on the map, really.
I mean, we're definitely on the map. I'd say we take up a huge amount of the map. And again, let's just focus on numbers and statistics here. And numbers and statistics can also be skewed. You can show certain ones that show certain things. So I'm not going to say America's number one. I'm not going to say they're number 10. I'm not even going to say that. I am going to say it would be foolish to ignore the fact that significant competition is happening in certain places. Specifically, I think China is really moving up very quickly, and that will have effects on people here. Whether that's good or bad is not my decision. Take the facts, look at them, make your own decisions. But we're seeing some interesting things. Well, I think you have heard of it, but I'd like to share it with some of the listeners here. But the Belt and Road Initiative is pretty cool to me. So China is essentially trying to bring back the Silk Road, which was the famous thing that spanned all the way from Europe to the Far East, and it facilitated trade, and Marco Polo was all over it, and it was a cool time in history. They've gotten 155 countries to sign up to be part of this new Silk Road, the Belt and Road Initiative. And it's going to have ports and roads and train stations and all sorts of infrastructure to aid trade with China. Now, whether you like them, whether you don't, is not my business. Not important, frankly. This is going to be something that will have ramifications on the global economy. So again, in the interest of just being informed and knowing what's out there, I think this was something people should know is happening.
Yeah, and to just throw another quick fact in there, I mean, based on our own economy in the United States, 78% of Americans feel this economy is on the wrong track. That right there is a big number. You may be sitting at home thinking, I mean, that's more than 3/4. I mean, you could be that quarter thinking the economy's fine. I mean, stay educated. Down to it. I mean, I had no idea about that Silk Road. That's something that I can do to better myself. And if it's anyone reading this, watching this podcast and wants information out of this is something you can put in your back pocket to arm yourself. I'd say the best way through a bad economy and a bad life is education.
Absolutely.
Staying informed with the facts and presenting that to whatever the agenda is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the best we can do for ourselves. And it's so easy to have opinions on things. And sometimes the opinions aren't really important. Like I mentioned with commercial real estate, sometimes it's just about the facts. What are the numbers? And that's all we really need to know sometimes. A lot of this commentary is becoming increasingly obvious that it's designed to sway us in a certain direction. And I think we owe it to ourselves just to do our own homework and figure things out ourselves. And I think to go back to it, are we being lied to? I don't know. I just don't think we're being told everything. And that's not to point fingers at anyone specifically. That's just the entire system right now, I think, it would just be best if everyone went home and did some homework themselves and looked into the things they're having opinions on.
Yeah, and that's why I brought you on today, Antarah, because me and you obviously have different point of views in this world, and me and you, I go back on this all the time. You've taught me things, I've taught you things on how things are run, and it certainly is, it comes down to one thing, is information. How are you getting information? Is it from a reliable source? And do you just believe it? Do you believe it just because you believe it, or do you believe it because it's fact? Fact and fiction, perception is reality. Take these little things out of this podcast today. Use them in your tool belt against the matrix, against the world, and everything else you got going on. But I mean, that was the. Any closing words with you, Antarah? I mean, that's really the message we have today.
I got one, and I think I need to mention this because we do mention a few things in this that are a little scary, right? Warren Buffett said, "Be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful." We are entering a time right now where people are very fearful. And whether they're right or not remains to be determined. But either way, there are going to be tremendous opportunities. Commercial rate delinquencies, that's an opportunity. People buying houses in cash at 1/3 of the population, big opportunity. Don't be afraid. Do your homework. Thank us later.
Yeah. And my final message is stay informed. Keep that information new, fresh, and make it reliable, right? You can't get anywhere in this world and especially in 2023 in the next couple of years without having the right facts in front of you. I think that makes a big game changer in what's going to happen with your life and everyone around you that you love and care about. So without still talking all day, Antarah, it was a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much, Joe. Always a pleasure on my end, too.
Well, I appreciate everyone stopping by today on the Still Talking podcast. We'll see you guys next Wednesday.